I took the night shift job at Henderson's distribution warehouse because the pay was decent and I needed the money. It was supposed to be easy, you know, walk around, check the doors, watch the cameras. Nothing ever happens at these places. That's what I thought. Anyway, it was my third week on the job when things got weird. The warehouse was massive, like 3 football fields of storage space with rows and rows of industrial shelving units that went up maybe 30 feet high. During the day, forklifts were buzzing around and workers were shouting to each other, but at night, dead silent. Just me, the hum of the overhead lights, and my footsteps echoing off the concrete. I was doing my usual rounds around 2 in the morning. The fluorescent lights above flickered occasionally, casting these strange shadows between the shelving units. I had my flashlight even though the lights were on because some areas, especially near the loading docks, got pretty dark. I was walking past aisle 12 when I heard it, a scraping sound, metal on concrete. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened. The sound came again, slow and deliberate, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small in that huge space. "Security. Anyone there?" Nothing, just silence. Then the scraping sound again, but this time it was coming from a different direction. Behind me now. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness between the shelves. Empty, just boxes and pallets stacked high. I radioed to the office, but Martinez, the guy who monitors the cameras, didn't pick up. He probably dozed off. It happens sometimes. I decided to check it out myself. Probably just the building settling, or maybe a rat, I told myself. But my heart was pounding harder than it should have been. I moved slowly down aisle 15, my flashlight sweeping side to side. The shelves on either side of me were packed with boxes, labeled with serial numbers and barcodes. Everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A pallet jack, one of those manual ones, sitting in the middle of the aisle. It hadn't been there during my last round an hour ago. I was sure of it. I approached it carefully, my hand instinctively moving to the radio on my belt. The pallet jack had a wooden pallet on it, with several boxes stacked on top. Nothing unusual about that, except this aisle was supposed to be cleared for maintenance. Nobody should have moved anything here. That's when I noticed the boxes. They were torn open. Cardboard flaps ripped back like someone had gone through them in a hurry. I leaned in closer with my flashlight. Electronics. High-end stuff. Laptops, tablets, smartphones still in their packaging. "Oh no," I whispered. Someone was stealing from the warehouse. I immediately radioed Martinez again. "Martinez, wake up. We got a situation. Looks like a break-in. Aisle 15. Static." Then his voice, groggy and confused. "What? Say again?" "Someone's been going through inventory. Get on the cameras. Check the east loading dock entrance." "Copy that." "Give me a second." I stayed where I was, my eyes scanning the darkness around me. If someone was stealing, they might still be here. The warehouse had emergency exits all over, but most of them were alarmed. The only way in and out without triggering anything was through the loading docks, and those were supposed to be locked. Martinez came back on the radio. "I'm not seeing anything on the cameras. All the doors are secure." "That's impossible. Someone moved this stuff." "I'm telling you, man, the cameras show nothing. You're the only person in there." A chill ran down my spine. If the cameras showed nothing, that meant whoever did this knew where the blind spots were, and that meant they'd been here before. Maybe they worked here. I heard footsteps, running, fast, coming from somewhere deeper in the warehouse, maybe 2 aisles over. I didn't think. I just ran after them, my flashlight bouncing wildly as I moved. "Stop! Security!" I shouted. I rounded the corner into aisle 17 and saw a figure, just for a second. Dark clothing, average height, moving fast toward the back of the warehouse. I chased them, my radio bouncing against my hip. The figure darted between shelves, and I lost sight of them. I slowed down, breathing hard. This was stupid. I should call the police, not chase after a thief alone. But I was angry now. This was my job, my responsibility. I made my way toward the back storage area, where they kept the damaged goods and returns. It was darker back here, only a few lights working. The air smelled like cardboard and dust. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the quiet. Then, I heard a door close. Soft, but distinct. The back office. A small room where the warehouse manager kept files and a desk. It had a door that locked from the inside. I approached slowly, my flashlight aimed at the door. It was closed. I put my hand on the handle and tried it. Locked. "I know you're in there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The police are on their way. You should come out." No response. I pressed my ear against the door. I could hear breathing on the other side. Someone was definitely in there. "Martinez, call the cops. Now," I said into my radio. "Already did. They're 10 minutes out." 10 minutes. I backed away from the door and positioned myself where I could watch it. If they tried to run, I'd see them. I wasn't going to tackle anyone or try to be a hero, but I could at least identify them. The minutes crawled by. My legs were shaking from the adrenaline. I kept my flashlight trained on that door, waiting for it to open, but it never did. The person inside just stayed there, quiet, waiting. When the police finally arrived, they announced themselves at the main entrance. I guided them back to the office. 2 officers, both looking alert despite the late hour. "He's in there," I told them. Locked himself in. One officer knocked hard on the door. "Police, open up." Nothing. They knocked again, louder this time. "Last chance. We're coming in." Still nothing. The officer nodded to his partner, who pulled out a small pry bar. It only took a few seconds to force the door open. They went in first, flashlights up, calling out commands. I stayed in the hallway, my heart in my throat. Then I heard one of them swear. "Clear. No one's in here." I pushed past them and looked inside. The office was empty. Just a desk, filing cabinets, and a small window high up on the wall. The window was open, the screen removed. They'd climbed out. "Check the ground outside," one officer said into his radio. They found footprints in the dirt below the window, leading away from the building and disappearing into the employee parking lot. Whoever it was, they were gone. The police took my statement and reviewed the security footage with Martinez. The cameras had caught glimpses of the person, but they'd known exactly where to stay hidden. Dark hoodie, face covered, gloves. Professional. The company did an inventory check the next day. About $15,000 in electronics were missing. Whoever did it had been planning this for a while. I kept working there for another month, but I was always looking over my shoulder. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow between those shelves made my pulse quicken. The thief never came back, at least not while I was there. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that moment when I pressed my ear against the door and heard them breathing on the other side, just separated by a thin piece of wood. And I wonder what would have happened if they'd opened that door instead of going out the window. I'm just glad I never had to find out. Working overnight at a gas station on Highway 47 wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills while I was in community college. The place was a typical roadside stop. You know? 2 pumps, a small convenience store, bathrooms that I had to clean every shift. It sat right off the highway, surrounded by woods on 3 sides, and a cracked parking lot that never seemed to have more than 2 or 3 cars at a time. Most nights were boring. Truckers would stop for coffee and cigarettes, sometimes a lost family looking for directions, the occasional drunk trying to buy more alcohol. I'd read textbooks between customers and watched the clock tick towards 6 in the morning when my shift ended. But there was this one guy who started coming in regularly, always around 3:30 in the morning, always alone. The first time I saw him, I didn't think much of it. He was probably in his late 40s, thin, wearing a grey jacket that had seen better days. He bought a pack of cigarettes and an energy drink, barely said a word, just paid in cash and left. The second time, a few nights later, same thing, cigarettes and an energy drink. But this time he stood at the counter longer, watching me count his change. His eyes were weird, you know, not blinking much, just staring. "You work here every night?" he asked. His voice was flat, monotone. "Yeah, most nights," I said, handing him his change. I tried to sound friendly but professional. "Have a good one." He nodded slowly and left. Through the window, I watched him get into an old sedan parked at the far end of the lot, away from the lights. He sat there for maybe 10 minutes before driving off. After that, he came in every single night, always the same time, always the same items, and every night, he'd ask me a question. Personal questions that made me uncomfortable. You in school? You got a boyfriend? What time do you get off work? I kept my answers vague and tried to stay polite. You learn pretty quick, working overnight, that you don't want to antagonize weird customers. You smile, you deflect, you stay calm. But this guy was setting off every alarm in my head. The questions got more specific. He started noticing things about me. New earrings, a different hairstyle. He commented on my car in the parking lot, which meant he'd been looking at it, memorizing it. That made my skin crawl. I mentioned it to my manager, Dave, but he basically shrugged it off. As long as he's not threatening you, there's nothing we can do. Just stay professional. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one dealing with this guy at 3 in the morning with nobody else around. Then one night, things escalated. The guy came in at his usual time, but instead of immediately grabbing his cigarettes and drink, he just walked around the store, slowly, looking at things but not really shopping. I was behind the counter, pretending to organize lottery tickets, but I was watching him in the security mirror mounted in the corner. He kept glancing at me. Quick looks, then back to whatever shelf he was pretending to browse. After about 10 minutes, he finally came to the counter. No cigarettes, no drink. Just stood there, staring at me. "Can I help you find something?" I asked. My voice came out shakier than I wanted. "I've been thinking about you," he said, just like that. Direct. Matter of fact, my stomach dropped. "Sir, if you're not buying anything, I need to ask you to leave. I see you every night. You're always here. Always alone." He leaned forward slightly. "That's dangerous, you know. A young girl like you, all by herself." I stepped back from the counter, my hand moving toward my phone. "You need to leave. Now. I'm just saying, you should be careful. Anything could happen out here." His tone wasn't overtly threatening, but the implication was clear. He was making sure I knew how vulnerable I was. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now," I said, holding up my phone. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "No need for that. I'll go." He turned and walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "See you tomorrow night." The moment he left, I locked the door and called the police. I didn't care if Dave would be mad about closing the store early. A deputy showed up about 20 minutes later. I explained everything, showed him footage from the security cameras. The deputy took notes and got the guy's license plate from the recorded video of the parking lot. "We'll run his plates and see if there's anything on him," the deputy said. "In the meantime, keep the door locked. Only open it for customers you feel comfortable serving. And call us immediately if he shows up again." He showed up again the next night, right on schedule, 3:30 in the morning. I saw his car pull into the lot, and I immediately called the police. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I kept the door locked and watched him through the window. He walked up to the door and tried the handle. When it didn't open, he knocked. Not aggressive, just casual knocking, like he was a regular customer who didn't understand why the door was locked. "We're closed for cleaning," I shouted through the glass. He cupped his hands around his eyes and peered inside, looking right at me. "It's me. You know me. Come on, open up." I said, "We're closed. Leave, or I'm calling the police." I already called them, I wanted to add, but something told me not to let him know that. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at me through the glass. Then he smiled again, that same cold smile, and walked back to his car. But he didn't leave. He just sat there, parked at the edge of the lot, his headlights off, engine running, waiting. The police arrived 12 minutes later. It felt like an hour, 2 deputies this time. They approached his car with flashlights. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the guy talking to them, gesturing casually like he was just explaining a misunderstanding. After about 5 minutes, they walked back to the station. One of them knocked on the door and I unlocked it. "His name is Michael Rourke," the deputy said. "He's got a record. Stalking charges from 5 years ago in another county. Restraining order violation. We've told him he's not allowed on this property anymore. If he shows up again, call us immediately and we'll arrest him for trespassing." "That's it?" I asked. "He just gets a warning?" We need him to violate a direct order to make an arrest stick, the deputy explained. But trust me, he knows we're watching now. Most of these guys back off once they know law enforcement is involved. Most of them, not all. I finished my shift, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every car that drove past the station made my heart race. Every shadow outside the windows looked like someone standing there, watching. Michael Rourke didn't come back that night. Or the next. Or the next. A week went by without any sign of him. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe the deputies were right. Maybe he'd moved on. Then, on Friday night, I was taking out the trash to the dumpster behind the building. It was around 4 in the morning, and I was tired and careless. I propped the back door open with a brick so I wouldn't lock myself out. I walked to the dumpster, maybe 30 feet from the building, hoisted the bags up and tossed them in. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, and there he was, Michael Rourke, standing between me and the back door. Just standing there in the shadows, his hands in his jacket pockets. "Hi," he said, almost friendly. "Told you we'd see each other again." I didn't think. I just screamed, loud as I could, and I ran, not toward the building where he was blocking the path, but toward the front, around the side of the building where the pumps and lights were. He chased me. I could hear his footsteps on the gravel behind me. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, my lungs burning, my legs pumping. I rounded the corner and saw a truck parked at the pumps. A trucker was fueling up. A witness. Safety. "Help!" I screamed. "Help me!" The trucker looked up, saw me running, saw Michael behind me, and immediately understood. He was a big guy, and he stepped away from his truck and positioned himself between us. "That's far enough," the trucker said to Michael, his voice hard. "You need to back off." Michael stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Michael looked at me, looked at the trucker, and slowly backed away. He walked to his car, got in, and drove off. The trucker stayed with me while I called the police. They came again, and this time they put out a warrant for Michael Rourke's arrest. Trespassing, stalking, attempted assault. They caught him 2 days later at a motel 15 miles away. He was sentenced to 18 months. I quit the gas station the next week. My manager tried to get me to stay, said they'd install better locks, better cameras, but I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I thought about going back there, I'd see Michael Rourke's face in my mind. That smile, those dead eyes. I got a job working breakfast shift at a diner instead. Daylight hours only. Lots of customers, lots of witnesses. I don't work alone anymore, and I never will again. I started working as a janitor at Mercy General Hospital about 6 months ago. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The pay was better than day shift, and honestly, I preferred working when the hospital was quieter, fewer people around, less chaos. Just me, my cleaning cart, and the occasional nurse walking past. The hospital was old, built in the 70s, with that institutional feel to it. Long hallways with linoleum floors, harsh fluorescent lighting, that antiseptic smell that never quite goes away no matter how much you clean. Most of the building was fine, but there was one wing that always made me uncomfortable. The psychiatric ward, 4th floor, east wing. Secured doors, restricted access, patients with serious mental health issues. I wasn't supposed to go in there alone. Hospital policy. A staff member from the ward was supposed to let me in and stay with me while I cleaned. But sometimes, late at night, when they were short-staffed, they'd just buzz me through the security door and tell me to be quick. That's what happened. On the night everything went wrong. I arrived at the 4th floor psych ward around 2 in the morning with my cleaning cart. I pressed the intercom button, next to the security door. A woman's voice came through, tired and distracted. "Yeah? Janitorial services," I said. "Here to clean the common areas." "Okay, come in. I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything." The door buzzed and clicked open. I pushed my cart through, and it locked behind me automatically. That always made me a little nervous, knowing I couldn't just leave without someone buzzing me out. I was locked in there with them. The ward had a long main hallway with patient rooms on both sides. Most of the doors were closed, but a few were open with the lights off, patients sleeping inside. At the end of the hall was the nurse's station, a glass-enclosed desk where staff could monitor the floor. I could see a nurse inside, her face lit by a computer screen. She barely glanced up when I wheeled my cart past. I started in the common room, a sad little space with worn couches, a TV mounted on the wall, and tables where patients could eat meals or do activities. It was empty now, lights dimmed. I swept the floor first, then mopped, working methodically. The sound of water sloshing in the bucket echoed in the quiet. That's when I heard the door. Not the main security door I came through, a different door. The door to the high-risk patient rooms. Those were at the far end of the ward, separated by another locked door. Patients who were violent or severely unstable stayed back there. I'd never been in that section, didn't want to be, but I heard that door open. A soft click, then the sound of it swinging on its hinges. I stopped mopping and looked down the hallway. The door was standing open, just darkness beyond it. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I walked toward the nurse's station. The nurse was still at her computer, typing something. I knocked on the glass. She looked up, annoyed. "The door to the high-risk section is open," I said, pointing down the hall. Her expression changed immediately. Confusion, then alarm. "What? That's not possible. That door is always locked." She stood up quickly and grabbed her keys, moving past me toward the open door. I followed, even though every instinct told me to stay back. She approached the doorway carefully and peered inside. "Oh my God," she whispered. One of the rooms back there was open too. And it was empty. The patient was gone. "Who was in that room?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just pulled out her radio and started talking fast, calling for security, for backup, using codes I didn't understand. Her hands were shaking. "You need to get out of here," she said to me. "Now, go to the main door and wait for security." "Which patient was it?" I asked again. She looked at me, and I saw real fear in her eyes. "Trevor Hollis. He was here for attempted murder, stabbed 3 people before the police got him. They were evaluating him for competency to stand trial." My blood went cold. I turned and started walking back toward the main security door, abandoning my cleaning cart. I just wanted out. But before I could reach the door, the lights went out. All of them. The entire ward plunged into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in after a few seconds. Dim red bulbs spaced along the hallway, casting everything in a hellish glow. I could hear the nurse behind me, speaking urgently into her radio, trying to figure out what happened. "Stay calm," she called out to me. "Security is on the way." But I wasn't calm. I was terrified, because I realized something. The lights going out wasn't an accident. Someone had turned them off. Trevor Hollis had turned them off, and he was somewhere in this locked ward with us. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to see in the dim emergency lighting. The shadows were thick, and every patient room door looked like a black void. He could be in any of them. Waiting. I heard movement, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere down the hallway, but I couldn't tell exactly where. The acoustics in that place were weird, sounds bouncing off the walls. "Trevor?" the nurse called out, her voice wavering. "Trevor, we're not going to hurt you. We just want to help you get back to your room." Silence. Then a voice. Male. Rough. "You locked me up. You all locked me up like an animal." He was close. Too close. Maybe 20 feet away, hidden in the shadows of one of the patient rooms. "Trevor, let's talk about this," the nurse said. She was trying to sound calm, professional, but I could hear the fear underneath. "We can work this out. No more talking." He screamed. The sudden volume made me jump. Then I heard running footsteps. Fast, coming toward us. The nurse ran back toward the nurse's station, and I ran with her. We both scrambled inside and she slammed the door, locking it from the inside. The station had glass walls, but it was reinforced, meant to protect staff in exactly this kind of situation. Through the glass, I saw him, Trevor Hollis. He emerged from the shadows, a tall, thin man in hospital scrubs, his face twisted with rage, and in his right hand, he was holding something. A metal tray from the common room. Not sharp, but heavy, a weapon. He walked toward the nurse's station slowly, his eyes locked on us. When he reached the glass, he raised the tray and smashed it against the window. The glass shuddered but held. He hit it again and again. Each impact sent spiderweb cracks spreading across the surface. "Where's security?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They're coming," the nurse said, but she didn't sound sure. Trevor kept hitting the glass. The cracks were getting worse. I could see small pieces starting to break away at the impact points. The glass wasn't going to hold much longer. "Get back," the nurse said, pulling me toward the rear of the station, away from the glass. We huddled in the corner, and I looked around desperately for anything we could use to defend ourselves. There wasn't much. Medical supplies, papers, a computer. Nothing useful against a man with a metal tray and nothing to lose. Then I heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. Voices. Multiple voices. Running footsteps. The security team had arrived. "Mercy, General Security. Get on the ground, now." Through the cracked glass, I saw Trevor turn toward them. 3 security officers, spread out in the hallway, hands on their belts where they kept pepper spray and batons. Behind them, more staff were arriving, including 2 large orderlies. Trevor looked at them, then back at us in the nurse's station, then at the officers again. For a moment, I thought he might charge them, but he didn't. He just dropped the metal tray. It clattered on the floor. Then he sank to his knees and put his hands on his head. "Don't hurt me," he said, his voice breaking. "Please don't hurt me." The officers moved in carefully, securing his hands with restraints. The orderlies helped them lift Trevor to his feet and escort him back to the high-risk section. The crisis was over. The nurse unlocked the door and we both stumbled out. My legs felt like rubber. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. One of the security officers came over to check on us. "You two okay?" he asked. "How did he get out?" the nurse demanded. "Those doors are supposed to be locked at all times." The officer shook his head. "We're still figuring that out. Looks like someone didn't secure his room properly during bed check, and the door to the high-risk section had a faulty lock. We've been meaning to replace it." Bad combination. Bad combination. That was an understatement. They took statements from both of us, documented everything, called the hospital administration. I was sent home early with pay. They told me to take a few days off, see a counselor if I needed to. I went back to work the following week, but I refused to clean the psych ward anymore. My supervisor tried to convince me it was safe now. They'd fixed the locks, added extra security measures, but I didn't care. I'd seen what could happen. I'd seen a man trying to break through that glass to get to us. I still work at the hospital, but I stick to the lower floors now. Emergency department, outpatient clinics, the cafeteria, anywhere but the 4th floor. Sometimes I take the elevator past that floor, and I glance at the button for the 4th floor. And I remember that night, the darkness, the cracked glass, Trevor Hollis's face on the other side. Some jobs just aren't worth the extra pay.